Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his government have officially lost the vote of confidence in the German Bundestag, bringing elections early in February one step closer. Now, the elections were originally scheduled to be held, I believe, on the 25th of September of 2025. However, after a collapse of the Tripartite coalition involving the third political party involved, the liberal Free Democrats, revolving around budgetary issues and the firing of one of the ministers and the leader of the party, the government collapsed, and so there was a vote of confidence held to officially see where the support for the current government was at. And as expected, they lost this vote, and this brings us a step closer to having early elections around the 23rd of February. That is the expected date. It's not completely official yet. There are still some formalities to be worked out. But with this result, we are pretty much almost certain to see early elections on the 23rd of February. We will have those held for the election of a new Bundestag that will determine, of course, Germany's parliamentary composition and, of course, the future German chancellor. So what I want to take a look at is the polls. Now, the polls we have looked at over the past several weeks and months, and not really much has changed. Even after the development of the collapse of the Tripartite coalition, the announcement of new candidates for chancellor, whether it be Friedrich Merz from the CDU-CSU, Alice Weidel from the AfD, or the decision of the SPD to remain behind Olaf Scholz, not much has changed in the polls. And in this video, I want to give kind of an overview of the results now that we are one step closer to having the elections in February. Now, the CDU-CSU remains on top with around 32% in the polls, clearly ahead by over 10 points of any other party. They will almost certainly win this election, and with that be given a mandate to put Friedrich Merz as the next chancellor of Germany. They, of course, need coalition partners, but they are in a very strong position for themselves. This is a very good result for the CDU-CSU, and as I've said on previous videos, historically speaking, maybe not the best result, but considering how divided and how much of a crowded field German politics has become, this is a very good result, and they are clearly ahead of all the other parties involved. The AfD is at around 19%. The AfD appears to have recovered some of the results from the scandals they suffered around the European elections in June of 2024. However, they have not yet reached the over 20% mark that they were at around the summer of 2023, and so this is a very good result for them. They are expected to gain around double their support, going up from around 10% in the last election to around 19% in this election, and they will likely be second place. They achieved second place narrowly at the European elections, and so a result like this for the AfD would be a tremendous success for the party, a huge milestone, becoming the second largest party in the country, beating the SPD. And even if they don't win second place, or maybe 20% of the votes, still this is a large increase for the party and will give them a lot more seats and a lot more presence in both the German Bundestag and, of course, German politics as well. The SPD, the party of the sitting chancellor of Germany, is at around 16.1%. Now, with Scholz being the chancellor, it is possible that his party could kind of regain some in the polls and eventually maybe even overtake the AfD. However, with a almost a 15-point gap behind the CDU-CSU, the chances of Olaf Scholz actually winning this election and becoming chancellor are very, very slim. Now, in 2021, he was able to pull it off, but he was not, of course, an incumbent chancellor. He was in the opposition, and the CDU-CSU had been in power for pretty much 16 years under then Chancellor Angela Merkel, and so the SPD had the kind of factor of being in the opposition to play for them. I don't think that this time it's going to be that same way. I think the SPD might be able to recover a few points, but I think it's pretty much certain that the SPD is going to lose this election and that Olaf Scholz has a very, very slim, almost certain chance of not remaining the Chancellor of Germany. Now, the Greens, which is the main coalition partner of the Tripartite coalition, the second biggest party, they were able to win around 15% of the vote in the 2021 elections, actually a lot less than they were expected to in the years prior. The Greens have, over the past several years, surged, especially among the youth vote. In 2019, they kind of hit they started beginning to surge in around 2022. They kind of peaked, and then they've started to lose support on the same time that the SPD has lost support and also the AfD has risen. There's been a shift away from focus on the environmental issues and more towards migration, more towards foreign policy. And we've also seen, as of previous elections, such as the European elections, that a lot of the youth voters that were previously strongly supportive of the Greens have now shifted away to other parties, including the AfD itself. And so the Greens have lost their momentum. They'll no longer have the kind of maximum support that they did around 2021. In the 2021 elections, it was even possible that the Greens would win and that their chancellor candidate, Annalena Baerbock, would become the chancellor of Germany. That is pretty much out of the question. They have shifted and have made Robert Habeck the chancellor candidate, but with them at fourth place, they pretty much have no chance of winning this election. 12.9% would be, I believe, their second best result. So it's not a total wipeout. It's not a total disaster for the Greens. But considering how strong they were, considering how much momentum and potential the party had just a few years ago, this is going to be a very disappointing and bad result. And what's even worse about it is that this is a result where the SPD is losing a lot of voters, and the SPD and the Greens do have some overlap. They do both have kind of a center left profile, and so you would think with the SPD collapsing in support, the Greens would be able to take some away. But as we can see, even with around a 10-point drop in support for the SPD, the Greens are still losing support from what they got in 2021. Now, the Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht, led by, of course, Sarah Wagenknecht herself, which split away from Die Linke, is polling around 5.6%. It is still up in the air whether or not they can manage to cross the 5% threshold and enter the German Bundestag. Now, at the EU elections, they managed to get over 6%, and of course, in the 3 East German state elections, they clearly crossed the 10% threshold there. However, whether or not they will be able to achieve this is still up for debate. I would say that as of now, I think they are going to narrowly make it over the 5% threshold. Some polls have showed them around 8%. Some have shown them around falling below, only winning around 4%. But the majority have had them around 5 or 6. And so I think it will be very close, very narrow. But I think the Alliance Sarah will win enough votes to make it into the Bundestag as an actual faction. That will mean the 10 representatives they have now will return, and of course they will gain new around 40 seats, and it be a kind of left-wing faction there, replacing Die Linke, which is expecting to only get around 3% and will likely fall below the 5% threshold. Now, the FDP has suffered a lot over the past several weeks and months. They had a huge scandal where it was reported that the FDP actually was planning on leaving the Travel Light Coalition early. They had a plan for a possible withdrawal, and they were trying to maximize the way leaving the coalition would benefit themselves. And so this was seen very negatively by their coalition partners and by the German media and lots of the public. However, the FDP was already, kind of struggling on the 5% mark, so it's not really clear how much of an impact this has made. I would say the FDP is now most likely not going to make it into the German Bundestag. They could make it. They got over 5% at the EU elections, and so it is still possible for them to make it over the threshold. But as of now, this is not a good sign for them where they are at in the polls. And if they lose representation, that means if they fall below 5%, they won't win any seats in the German Bundestag. And this will be a major crisis for the FDP as a political party. This has happened before. In 2013, it lost all representation in the Bundestag. However, under new leadership, with Christian Lindner himself becoming the leader, it was able to recover itself and in the next election come back with a strong showing. I don't know if they're going to be able to replicate that. So if they fall below 5% here, we could see possibly the extinction of the FDP as a political force in Germany, which is very significant because the FDP has been, one of the major players in German politics long before the Greens, the BSV, the AfD. It has been a party that kind of competed and was able to be a middle person or a kingmaker between the CDU, CSU, and the SPD back from the 1940, pretty much from 1949 until the 1980s. Now, Die Linke, of course, is well below the 5% threshold. They were below 5% in 2021, and so with a further loss in support, it's clear that they are going to fall below 5%. However, there is still a kind of caveat. There is another way of entering the Bundestag if they win 3 direct mandates. Now, initially, the German Constitutional Court made a change where this was overridden, that you could no longer use this mechanism to enter the German Bundestag, and then it was appealed. And so there were some of the reforms from the electoral reform law that were kept, and some that were overturned by the Constitutional Court. And the way it is now is that a party can still enter the Bundestag with 3 direct mandates. However, if they fail to win 3, then if they get 1 or 2, the people that win those seats will not be able to take those seats. So basically, it is all or nothing. They have to win the 3 seats to get a faction in the German Bundestag, and they are trying to put up some of their most high-profile candidates. Most notably, Gregor Gysi in his seat in Berlin, Zoran Pellmann in Leipzig, which is a very strong left-wing seat, and of course, Bodo Ramelow from Die Linke is going to be running in Thuringia, actually for a federal seat in the Bundestag. And if those 3 can win their seats, then Die Linke will enter into the Bundestag with around 2.9%. This will give them enough seats to form a significant group, but they will not be strong enough to form a faction. And even if they're able to pull this off, which is nowhere near certain, it would still be a major defeat for the party. They would still suffer heavy losses, and it still would be potentially one step closer to them becoming politically extinct, like the FDP is. All except certain parts of East Germany, such as Thuringia, where I believe they'll hold on for a little while longer. Now, the Free Voters are also attempting to play with this strategy. Now, the Free Voters are expected to get around 2.5% of the vote. In the last election, they got around the same, and so they are nowhere near the 5% threshold. They are really only strong in a few states where they are organized, most notably Bavaria, where they are actually part of the state government there, and that is what is going to be apparently a part of their strategy. Hubert Aiwanger, the leader of the Free Voters, and a couple other very strong candidates that were elected at the local level are going to attempt to run for the Bundestag and win direct mandates. And if Aiwanger and two others can win direct mandates, they will be able to enter into the Bundestag with around 2% proportional representation. So if they win the 3 direct mandates, they will enter in with about 20 seats and form a significant group in the Bundestag. Now, like I said, it's very unlikely that he will be able to pull this off. Hubert Aiwanger won a direct mandate in his seat for the Landtagswahl in Bavaria, but a much smaller district, and he is running against the CSU, which of course is a veteran political party, one that has dominated Bavarian politics for, decades now. And so whether or not he will be able to pull that off, I think Hubert Aiwanger might have a decent chance at winning his own seat. About the other two, I'm not sure. I do not think that they will be able to win these seats, but if they do, that is the kind of strategy for the Free Voters and Die Linke to get into the German Bundestag. The FDP has no districts where they can win a direct mandate. I believe they've only won one direct mandate, or two rather, one after unification in 1990 and one back in the early 50s. But aside from those two, the FDP has never really been close to winning any direct mandates. So if they fall below 5%, they will not be able to win any seats. The BSV does have a few areas where it's strong, but there's really no candidates that are going to be able to break through. So I'd say that the mechanism of getting the 3 districts is really only for Die Linke and the Free Voters. So if this result kind of plays out based off how the polls are showing, we can expect the CDU-CSU to form a government either with the SPD or with the Greens. They have ruled out working with the AFD, and there are a lot of people in the CDU-CSU, especially the CSU in Bavaria, who are kind of have a negative feeling about working with the Greens. And so I would say, as of now, the most likely coalition would be a CDU-CSU SPD coalition, with Friedrich Merz becoming the new chancellor and the SPD becoming a junior partner in the coalition. This, of course, is not certain, but I would say, as of now, this is the most likely to occur. And the last thing I want to look at is the debate schedule. Of course, there's been a number of debates planned for these elections. Some include, of course, just the main candidates of the 2 main parties. Some include the declared chancellor candidates, and some include all the parties involved. Now, of course, political parties have to actually declare a chancellor candidate, meaning that they are vying for that position, and not every party does that. The FDP is not doing that, but we have 4 declared candidates so far. The Friedrich Merz from the CDU-CSU, Olaf Scholz from the SPD, Robert Habeck from the Greens, and Alice Weidel from the AFD. And I believe actually Sarah Wagenknecht has declared herself as the chancellor candidate. And so we will have around 5 official candidates, people that are kind of represent their parties, and will be the chancellor, assuming that party wins the power, or wins the political strength to put forward a chancellor. But in most cases, it's probably going to be, it's almost certainly going to be Merz, but Scholz is, of course, the incumbent, and so there is a debate between Merz and Scholz on the 9th of February, and there's also 2 general debates with all the parties involved, one on the 28th of January and one on the 20th of February. Now, of course, these people have to accept the invitations, and sometimes the party will put in someone else, maybe a deputy leader or maybe a parliamentary leader instead of their chancellor candidate, and so these are still kind of, not for sure, not certain who's all going to be there, but this is the kind of debate schedule as of now. So that's going to be it for this video. I wanted to give everyone an update on the polling in Germany for the federal election. And of course, we are still, we're getting closer, but we're still a few months out. But as it gets closer, I will do some more videos on the polls themselves, and of course, looking at the parties. Also, probably do some videos on the new leadership of parties such as Die Linke or maybe the Greens. And so, yeah, that's going to be it for this video. If you do like it, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching.